So here's an outline of what we're going to talk about today. This is about, AI coding agents and boosting productivity. I'm going to start out with one slide on what is a coding agent and why you might want to listen to the presentation. Then we'll do a little bit of a retrospective and talk about the old way of doing things and the new way of doing things that coding agents are going to help us with. We'll look at a little bit of the history. So once we've kind of contrasted how we solve problems without them and how we solve problems with them, how did we get here? Sort of what was the technology progression that got us to this point? Then I'm going to do something I've never done before in one of these webinars, which is I'm going to do a live demo. So I've got a problem and we're going to fire up a coding agent and we're going to try and get the coding agent to solve it for us, all within the context of the sort of 45 minutes that we've got together. I'm going to hope it goes well, but we'll see. Then once we've done that, and you can kind of see the power of these agents, then we'll talk about what are some good use cases. And it turns out there are many of them. So, and again, we're kind of thinking internally, we're going to focus inside the organization as opposed to building things for customers. We're going to build things to make your organization go faster. Then we'll have a almost like a playbook. So how do you approach coding tasks with agents? What are the ways that you go about it? And I'm hoping that the demo that we do partway through is going to make that discussion a little bit clearer, maybe. And then we'll sort of look at some concluding thoughts. So let's get going. So the why and the why. So why, right? So my hope is that in these 45 minutes, you'll see how you can use AI tools to go from, I wish I had code or a program that would do that to a working prototype. And it turns out that I do this all the time. And actually, the CEO at Synaptic is big into this. He is always using coding agents to solve problems that he has. So I'm hoping at the end you'll maybe go, yeah, I think I might be able to do that myself and kind of dive into it. But then what is a coding agent? It's just a goal-driven assistant. So you say, hey, here's this thing I would like you to build. That agent can plan, can write code, can run the code, can fix the code, and you just kind of sit back and guide it. You give it a little bit of supervision, you kind of keep it in track and interact with it as it goes. And again, you'll see a demo of that in just a minute. Let's think about the old way versus the new way. So suppose you're the CEO, right? And it doesn't matter. I'm picking a CEO because they tend to be very time constrained, and that'll come into play in just a second. But you are anyone at a company and you've got a problem and you don't necessarily have to have technical skills, but you say, our CRM is a mess. I keep having to check for problems and nag the sales reps to fix them. I wish we could automate checking and push issues to them, right? It's like a very common problem, messy CRM. It'd be great if it was always in pristine condition, but it's not. So the old way to do it is you call your IT department. Now, let me say I am very pro IT departments, and I'm going to talk about why you still need your IT department in a minute, right? But this is sort of the old way, which is a characterization of what happens. So the IT department is going to go, okay, good. You got a problem. We're going to help you solve it. We're going to go through the software development life cycle. We'll plan, analyze, design, implement, test, and maintain, right? Software development is a very challenging problem. And so you're going to have lots of people. You've got to have architects and project managers and product owners, software engineers, full stack developers, people who do UI, UX, QA people, business analysts, DevOps people, right? So it turns into this sort of large problem. What happens if you do it with a coding assistant? And again, a coding assistant not going to get rid of your IT department. I'll talk about that in just the next slide. So you say, hey, coding assistant, our CRM is HubSpot. It's got lots of missing data, duplicates, and bad dates. I'd like to create a system that checks the CRM every night for common errors and send emails to the responsible sales reps with a list of the things that need to be fixed, right? So you can see I sort of took it from the pain point to a little bit of a description of what it is that I want the coding agent to do for me. We'll see that transition as we go through the rest of the slides. And the coding agent will go, okay, I got a few questions for you. So it's actually going to work with you to be able to solve that problem. Why doesn't everybody write code? And so what are the things need to have to write software, right? So one thing is you need time because it is, as I said, it's a challenging process and you need knowledge of coding. So you think about where your average CEO is. Not all CEOs, again, our CEO is very technical, and that this may not be where he lives, but CEO on average doesn't know a lot about coding and has very little spare time, right? Now, your engineers, they know a ton about coding, but they're also super busy, right? They're working on lots of projects, internal facing, external facing, and so time is always a problem. But what do you need to write software with a coding assistant? So, what I would claim a coding assistant does is it has all the knowledge about coding that you need to solve certain tasks. So, the barrier there is very low. You probably have the ability to talk to one of these coding agents and they are very, very fast. So it compresses those two axes. And so the CEO or the sort of non-technical person who just has a pain that they're dealing with in their everyday business life, they suddenly are in the upper right-hand corner of that trade-off and can actually start writing code. Your engineers, on the other hand, become superheroes, right? So they can get more done faster and your organization can benefit from it. I do want to point out that you still need your software team. So if you look at the kind of transition from proof of concept to a prototype to a MVP to production code, the idea is that you, as someone who's using a coding assistant who is not necessarily a coder, it gives you the ability to build POCs and prototypes very, very quickly. However, there is a big difference between having a POC or a prototype and having something that's actually production quality. And there's a lot of pain that can be experienced in going from this end to this end. So the software teams, the them in this case, they can help you with security and integrations and monitoring and deployment and testing and governance and all those kinds of things, which a coding assistant is probably not going to let you do. Now, your software team can use coding assistants, but their expertise is crucial if you're going to have something that's going to run in production. So, how do we get here? So, if you look at the evolution of coding assistants, we're going to go from left to right here. And so, think about traditional autocomplete. And when I think about autocomplete, it's almost like what's going on your cell phone. So you're typing a text message to somebody and it goes, "Hey, I think this is the next word." Or you're, typing in a Google Doc and it goes, "Oh, here's the next word that I think you might type." Those are based on very kind of simple analyses. Then you get into sort of smarter autocomplete. And so machine learning has, as in many domains, been applied to autocomplete. And so you get sort of more contextual information, maybe deeper understanding, you could almost say, of what it is you're trying to accomplish with some writing, and it gets better for you. Then we got AI code completion. So we might be able to do something like, I'm going to tell you a function I want to write. So the scope is still somewhat limited. It is, I would like to have a function that sorts this array of things and they have these properties. And the AI code completion assistant can go like, boom, here is the function. Then now we've got chatbots, and the chatbots can do things like interactively debug. Now, interestingly enough, when I first started using coding assistants, I was using ChatGPT and I would write some code. I would get an error and I would put it in ChatGPT and I'd say, "Hey, what do you think's going on here?" And it would say stuff. I'd copy the code in and it'd say, "Oh, okay, like here's some new code." And I would copy that back over. So then what you do is you're stuck in this copy paste loop. The natural thing to do then is to integrate that into a development environment. So now the development environment sees the whole project, right? It has all the code, it knows how the code is changing, and it can help you do a better job of coding. And then finally, where we're going to look at today are these agentic AI systems. And again, an agent is it's just a piece of code, it's software, it's very powerful software that can solve multi-step tasks. So you can say, "Hey, I'd like you to go do this thing, and this thing is going to take 10 steps." And it'll go, "Okay, here's the steps I'm going to take. How do you feel about that? I'm going to go do it." It has access to your terminal, and we'll see that in a second, meaning it can run programs for you. So it has planning ability, it has access to tools, the same kind of tools that you would use if you were writing code. And it can sort of self-correct. So I've seen Claude Code, which is the thing we're going to use in a minute, actually sort of run its own code, see an error, and go, "Oh, that's not good. Let me figure out what went on there and fix the error, and then run the test again, and your code's just going, right?" So it's this sort of, I'm going to predict next word, all the way to I am this tireless software engineering expert who is going to write code and run code and fix code, and you're going to guide me along the way, but that's sort of where we are. Now, here's the part of the webinar where we're actually going to build a thing. And so let me just give you some preliminaries. So I mentioned Claude Code earlier. I'm going to use Claude Code at the command line. There are lots of other choices. It's just Claude Code is the one that I know the best, and I like it quite a bit. So that doesn't mean it's right for everybody, and there are lots of tools out there that are very powerful. So the process that we're going to go through is we're going to identify the problem. I've got a problem made up already. So we're going to identify the problem. Then we're going to describe what we want. And once we get the description, I'm going to drop down and start using Claude. And we're going to monitor the process as Claude writes the code. And you'll see a lot of back and forth there. I hope it works, right? You never know. I mean, I practiced this once before I got online with you today, but we're going to do it from scratch. So Claude's not going to have any memory of what it did before, and who knows where it's going to go. Then once it's written the code, we're going to test it out. I'm hoping there might be a bug or two that we can get Claude to fix. We'll see. And then we'll refine. So that's the process that we're going to go through. Here is identifying the problem. So we're going to pretend the following scenario. And I just made this up, but I've seen things like this in companies before. Every night, some zip files land in a directory, right? Like some data is coming in. Each of those zip files contains a spreadsheet essentially in CSV format. I got to open them, see what they contain, and then I got to send a Slack message to the data science Slack channel with the name of the file and the summary, right? So like every day I'm looking at this data, I got to unzip it. I got to sort of look at the header of the CSV, figure out what the data is, and then go like, hey, data science team, this thing is here. Take a look at it. And I got to do that every time, every morning I have to work on that thing. So that's the problem. That's the pain point. I would like to be able to automate that if possible. So now I realize this is a bunch of text, but this is actually literally what we're going to start out with. So I'm going to cut and paste that into Claude. We're going to do that next. So I went from the problem to a thing that's a little bit more specific. So now I'm saying I want a program I can run that looks in the directory named data. So I'm telling it where to look, extracts the contents of each zip file, which will be a single CSV per zip. So I'm telling it there's going to be zip files, there's a CSV in each of those. And I want to generate a 2 to 3 sentence summary of what each CSV contains. I'm also going to want a graphical user interface that shows the name of each CSV and the summary. And I want to be able to edit the summaries. Then I want to be able to check boxes for the ones that I want to send to the data science Slack channel. And those that I select are going to be sent as separate messages with a description and the name of the file, right? So we're going to cut and paste exactly that thing into Claude here in just a second. Now, I want to point out, I add this graphical user interface because I know nothing about graphical user interface programming. And if you asked me to build a web page to do this, it would take me a week. And what we're going to do is we're going to start out, right, live demo. So keep your fingers crossed. I have no idea how this is going to go, but I'm hopeful. So I'm going to start out by just literally taking that guy. I'm going to go over here to the command line. So notice I've got this directory called coding demo. Inside coding demo is a data directory. And if I look at data, I've just got some zip files there, right? So it's exactly the thing that I was talking about. So now I'm going to run Claude on the command line. And by command line, it means it's like PowerShell or the command prompt in Windows. And so I'm going to run Claude and it'll come up and say, hey, welcome back, Tim. It knows me. It doesn't know anything about what's going on in this directory. And so here I can type stuff. So I'm just going to paste that thing in. Looks like I missed. So I want a program I can run. So that's exactly what I said. Now, before I let it go, it turns out it has a few different modes. There's a thing called plan mode. So I just put it in plan mode. And by putting it in plan mode, I'm saying, hey, what I would like you to do is to take this input and then think about what you would like me to do and come back with a plan. So it says, oh, I'll help you create this program. Let me first explore your project structure to understand what we're working with. And notice it's going, yeah, there's nothing there, right? So then it's going to come up with a plan. Now, interestingly, it says, all right, it looks like it's wanting to do some unzipping. I can say, do you want me to proceed? Yes. Or don't ask me again for unzip commands. And so typically what I do is I just say, yeah, like have at it, right? Now I think it's looking at some of the data. It's trying to figure out what to do. In a minute, it's going to come back with a plan. And let me ask a few clarifying questions. Okay, great. So this is the kind of thing that a coding agent will do. It said, all right, I sort of understand the general intent. Okay, got it. So let me ask you a few clarifying questions. So notice it's asking about the GUI framework. So it's saying, do you want native Python? Do you want a professional looking modern interface, more features, but requires installation. I'm actually going to go with a web-based interface. Again, just because I can. You could choose any of these things and hopefully it would work. The summary type, you can either have basic analysis. So now I'm going to sort of summarize the CSVs. I can do AI generated or some hybrid approach. I am going to go with AI generated. It's going to require an API key. Um, and then it's asking, Slack, hey, do I have a token or I need to set it up? It turns out I know for a fact that I can do this. I want to do this with a Slack webhook, which I already have, right? Okay. And then what should happen with the extracted CSV files after processing? I'm going to say keep extracted, right? Okay. And then I'm ready to submit my answer. So now what's going to happen, right? So it's very supportive. It's like enthusiastic. Perfect. Now I have all the information I need. And you can see that it's sort of thinking about it and it tells you, hey, here's what we're going to do. I have an implementation plan. We're not going to read this real carefully. It's going to create a requirements file. There's going to be some environmental setup. It's going to write some Python files. And I'm going to say yes, right? So in some sense, the vibe coding, the sort of vibe and vibe coding is you just go, yeah, do it, right? So go for it. Now, what it's going to do is it says, hey, I'm going to implement the solution. And you can see here are the elements in the plan. And it's going to start moving through those things. So now, okay, great. So it's creating an environment. It's creating extract CSVs directory. It's going to build a processor, Slack notifier, and then an application that we can run, and then use it'll create a README for the whole thing. So I will say, so this is going to take just a couple of minutes, and I'll, maybe try and fill in the time a little bit. This is a very, very common way of interacting with coding agents. And this is all just very much as part of a conversation. Another way that people tend to interact with coding agents is they'll say, hey, here's the thing I want to build. I would like you to come up with a plan for it, right? Or a specification for it and write it out as a document. And so often people will use a coding agent to come up with a system design. And then that system design is editable, and you can go in and sort of load that in and read the system design and then say, do I like it? Do I want to tweak things? And then once the system design is set up, you can run Claude again and say, okay, great. Look in this file. There's a design for a system I'd like you to build. Can you consume that and build it for me? Okay, so it's creating the README. So we are almost there. Okay, so let's see. It did all that stuff. Now I'm going to say, how do I set up and run the program, right? Like that's all in the README, but let's see if we can get it to tell us here. And I'm hoping in 5 minutes we can get this thing done. Okay, so it's telling me some things to do, and I'm just gonna do this. So, whoops. Uh, Coding demo. So you can see it's actually written a bunch of stuff here. So it says run pip install requirements.txt. I'm going to do that. And then it's going to say, let's let that run. And again, you need to understand like at all what's happening here. It's just like, I'm just going to get a bunch of software that I need. Okay, that's fine. Let's deal with that later. Let's hope everything works. Okay, and then it's telling me I need to get my Claude API key. What I'm going to say is I want to use OpenAI instead of Claude. And if you look in dot dot slash keys dot text, you'll find the key and the webhook. Can you configure the env for me? Right? So that was this other thing it said. And then we should just be able to run the application. So it's going to read the keys and then it's going to change. Oh, yes, I would like you to go do that. Notice already I've said, hey, I've sort of changed. I don't want to use Claude. I want to use OpenAI for whatever reason. And it's going to go in and say, okay, I'm going to grab that content that you pointed me to. I'm going to update the CSV processor to call ChatGPT, for example. So, right. So instead of calling Anthropic, it's going to look at OpenAI. Then it's going to sort of go, well, now I need to get all the OpenAI software. And then I'm going to create the environment and then update the README with OpenAI instructions. So I think we're very close to being able to run it. And so again, like if I had to write this code, I would have to tell you, here's a plan. We'll reconvene in a week and we'll work on this thing. So now it's setting up the thing that prepares the environment and it's going to update the README. And now it's working on the README. And then I'm going to ask it what it wants me to do. Like, how can I run it? Okay, so we're almost there. And you can see it sort of downloading. All right, so updated, modified, created. There we go. So now we're just going to update the dependencies. So let's do that. And then we're going to try and run the app. Okay, so that's good. And now we're going to actually see what it built. So let's do that. Let's see if there's an error that occurs. So now we're just running the application. Oh, interesting. Okay, so now since it's a web-based app, we're actually going to go see what we've got. All right. All right, there you go. CSV summary and, and Slack sender. All right. So what it did was it found three CSV files. We've got shopping behavior, bank marketing, patient churn. Here's the summaries. The summary of this one says the CSV file contains detailed customer shopping behavior, including metrics such as age, gender, item purchase, etc. So notice that this thing is, I can say, Tim, look at this. And then I can say, Alice, look at this. So I'm going to select that one and that one. And then send selected to Slack. All right, let's see if it actually hit Slack. Oh, I had quit Slack otherwise. All right, so let's take a look in the data science channel. We're going to go here and data science. Okay, hang on. Let's try that again just because. Okay. Well, I don't see it going to Slack, but oh, nope, there it is. Okay. So it was waiting, right? So now I got Tim, look at this, Alice, look at this, and it did it again, right? So now what we've got is we've got this CSV summary bot that said, hey, there's this, shopping behavior updated CSV and so on, right? So what I would suggest is like think about how miraculous that was. I don't know how long that whole demo took. Maybe it was 10 minutes, I'm not sure. But what happened was we went from nothing. We went from a statement of a problem to having a functioning piece of code with a not horrible user interface. I'm sure that there are designers out there who could make it much better, but it does exactly what we asked for. And not too painful. So, okay. So now you can see that, like I'm sure looking at that and going, okay, that required a little bit more knowledge than I think I might have, but it's the kind of thing that you and somebody looking over your shoulder, you could say, here's what I want. Help me sort of work through these little technical details and then come up with a solution. So what are some good target use cases for this technology? Data chores are a big one. So that was sort of a data chore, I would claim. It's like we want to save time and reduce errors. So maybe I want to clean up some spreadsheets. I've got messy spreadsheets that come in and I want to straighten those things out. Or I want to create a dashboard. Very common use case. No need to sort of go off and talk to somebody. You can say, I want a quick dashboard that will slurp in the data from this particular location and give me a fancy display of it or an informative display. Now, the nice thing about this, which I should say is, notice how long it took. It took maybe 10 minutes to code that thing from scratch. If I didn't like it, I could literally throw the code away. I could modify my description and create it again in 10 minutes. So in an hour, I can iterate through 6 versions of that code. And at the end of the hour, I would probably have something beautiful that does exactly what I want. Same thing with dashboards, right? You can say, well, I don't really like the way that one looks. You can interact with Claude to try and make it look better, or you can just throw it out and say, I'm going to start over and go in a different direction. Data merging and then extracting content from PDFs, right? So turning PDFs into Word documents or spreadsheets if there's data buried in them, or pulling figures out to put in PowerPoint presentations. So data chores is a big one. Internal analytics is also one where at Synaptic we're finding a lot of leverage there. So, I'm trying to look at what are the drivers of customer churn, or which of our customer segments are most profitable, where are deals stalling in the sales funnel, which leads or sources produce the highest lifetime value? Which accounts are more likely to expand in the next quarter, right? So focusing your sales efforts. What is our sales cycle time by segment, or what products or features are actually correlated with renewals and retention? So these are the kind of things where you could pose the question. Now, I would say, what do you think is going to happen if you give those directly to Claude Code, right? So I literally just cut and paste one of these things. You could also think what would happen if you gave it to a junior developer. Actually, it turns out that the interaction is going to be pretty similar. So, and I did this. I picked one of these. It might have been the 3 drivers of churn, but I handed it to Claude. I just cut and pasted that. And I said, like, what are they? And he goes, okay, I see you're interested in churn, but I need to know something about the data that you've got. So it started asking me questions about where can I find the data? Is it in a SQL database? Is it in a spreadsheet? And so if you start answering those questions, it's going to ask you other questions, and eventually it's going to have enough information where it can then go, okay, I think I'm ready to build the system, and then it's going to go off and build the system for you. So again, I think a sort of an interesting mental model is very knowledgeable, friendly junior developer who is there all the time to help you with the things that you want to do in terms of getting programs written. Workflows is another big one. You can think about workflows around feature prioritization, bug tracking, setting meetings, task management. And if you look in the news, they're all over the place, right? So there are companies out there that want to do workflow automation for you. AI is reshaping PDF workflows, just article after article after article. So that's a great application domain for applying AI coding assistance. And again, these can be internally facing workflows. The last thing I want to do is just to talk about how you might approach coding tasks with agents or with coding assistants, right? So, and this isn't going to sound very different from the way you would approach tasks if you had a development team, although there are going to be some important differences that come up. So, as usual, you want some high frequency, high friction problem. So, the example that I came up with was every morning I go look at these stupid zip files and I got to extract them and I got to look at the CSVs and read them, and it's just a pain, right? So, there's this thing that happens all the time. Now, it also needs to be the case that the input and output are clear. So, in my case, it was, yeah, the data's in that directory in there in zip files, and the output I want is the name of the file and the description. Now, interestingly enough, the data can be messy. So I didn't say anything about the structure of the spreadsheet, right? Like how many sheets or how many columns there might be or what the data might be. So that data can be messy, but I have to be able to say, here's where you're going to find the input and here's what kind of output I want. And if you can do that, then the agent can go in and use, language models to kind of fill in cleaning up the messy part. It should also be the case early on that it's sort of low to medium risk if it's imperfect. So, you got to be willing to handle some imperfection. Again, like the development team is going to get you from the POC, which might have some problems, to something that's in production. And then it would be nice if there were measurable outputs, right? How much time did I save? What was the error rate like? Did I reduce the backlog? So again, like avoid at first things where there could be financial loss or compliance exposure unless you put very strong controls on it. Or, if the workflow is like tribal knowledge, it's just these four people in this department. They've been doing it for 30 years and they know kind of what happens, but nobody really understands what they're doing. So pick the right problem. I think you have to be able to define what success looks like. So you have to state the goal. What does it look like when it's done? So I kind of tried to come close to that in the example that I did. There should be acceptance checks. You have to be able to test it and say, has this worked? Do the totals match in the new way versus the old way? Are all the field present? Is there any personally identifiable information? Are the formatting rules being obeyed? So you can't just go build the thing and okay, I'm going to accept it, right? You have to go in and be able to test and test and test. You have to have an SLA. How fast does it have to run? How fresh does the data need to be? And then importantly, you need to think about what happens when it can't complete, right? Is there a path if the code breaks or if the API isn't accessible? Also, a very common pattern is to break it down into stages. So I basically said, hey, agent, go do everything. Now, it didn't do everything in one step. Notice it had a plan and it decomposed it. But it's also possible to start out and saying, all right, I just want to work on ingestion for now. Once I've ingested the data, I want to do some transformation, and then we're going to do some reasoning over it. We're going to summarize or classify or write text. Then we're going to do some verification. We're going to add some safety checks in there, and then we're going to sort of send it out, right? So we'll send it to Slack like we did, or to an email or a dashboard. And then importantly, actually, if you look at the application that got written, Claude tends to do a lot of logging of things. And so it's possible to go back and look at the logs and see where there were problems. So break it down. And then also, I think let's keep humans in the loop. So I don't believe again that the AI agents, I think what they're going to do is they're going to speed things up, but we're still going to need people. So one very common thing that we do is to have we will automatically sort of ship out high confidence outputs, especially when there's a machine learning model involved that goes, yep, I'm very certain about this particular item. Then we'll say, great, send it out. However, if there's some uncertainty in the model, you can route it to a queue. It's also very useful for humans to be able to look at what's changed since the last run. So, here's the report from today, here's the report from, yesterday, and what's the difference between them? And then often having these sort of approve deny buttons, right? So you put a button in there, which was like, I'm ready to send it to Slack. And so what I had done, if you sort of think about this, is I said, create the summary. I want to be able to edit it. So I was able to go in and make changes if I wanted to. And only when I was ready was I able to just push a button and say, okay, now other people can look at this. So keeping humans in the loop is important. And then I think, take a phased approach. Now, the interesting thing about this is that the timelines I think are super compressed. So 1 to 2 days, you might be able to have a demo which has fake data, So I'm gonna, maybe I have to sit there and handhold it a little bit, but I can show you the thing running. And, in my experience in working with these systems and in delivering code to clients, whether it was written with the help of an assistant or just the old-fashioned way, having a thing to look at tends to get the conversation going faster and with more seriousness, right? You can talk about ideas all day, but when you go like, look, here's the thing we could build, people tend to go, oh, like I really like that, or that's close, but if we did the following things, it would be better. And then, 2 to 4 weeks, you can have a pilot with real data. Maybe it's read only. We're not going to let the system change your data. We'll have human review. We're only going to roll it out to 5 users. And again, we've used this pattern with clients. And then, 4 to 8 weeks, we might have production. And so we've gotten the high-powered software developers involved to help us with automation and monitoring and SLAs and documentation and incident processes. And then, interestingly enough, one thing that we've tried to do inside Synaptic is when we're using these tools internally to automate our own processes, can we turn those into reusable templates? Have we done something that we can then apply to other workflows or in other parts of the business? Have we learned something and can we standardize it? And then that just sort of makes the whole thing go faster. What are my concluding thoughts on this, right? So you, non-developers, can code solutions to your own problems. So if you've got a problem, there's some data chore that's driving you crazy, you can actually break out one of these coding assistants and the first time you do it, it might not take 10 minutes, it might take 2 hours, but you will get faster with it. So the idea is that time and knowledge aren't limiting factors to a point, right? What happens is instead of time and knowledge being limiting factors, you sort of shift from coding to clarifying and validating and governing, right? So you saw, I was like, here's what I want. And then it said, okay, well, I need some clarification. We did that. Validation actually probably what I should have done and what you would do in practice is to take that summary that we got from OpenAI on the CSV, we would go look at it and go, yeah, that seems like that's good or not. You still need dev teams for complex tasks. Like, so if the task is complicated, you're not going to have a single coding agent go out and write some giant complicated system. Coding agents can help your developers build pieces of that system more quickly. Also, productionalization is a very different animal. So, that code that we wrote together in a few minutes is, it's fine, right? But it's not production quality. And then scaling is another beast as well. So, as I said, think of coding assistants. They're like these really eager, tireless junior developers, but they need lots of product guidance. So, they know how to code and they're like excited about it, but you got to tell them like, here's the thing that we're going to build. Also, turning these coding assistants inward can give your organization superpowers. You can just make processes faster, you can reduce friction inside the organization, and I would say seek outside experts to make that transformation faster and seamless. So, companies like Synaptic, I hate to use these business sayings, but we're eating our own dog food, right? So we're really trying internally to use these tools inside of our company to help us do things more quickly as an organization. And we're helping clients understand how to use these tools. And we're using these tools as we build software for clients. And so having someone around who's done it many, many times and understands how to make that transition from the sort of, if we think about the phased approach from the quick demo to the pilot to production and then scaling, can give you the confidence that you're going to be successful at it as you go through these things. I will say this, although I don't know if Diane wanted to, I'm going to do another webinar on Wednesday, February 26th at 1 p.m. talking about why AI projects fail and how to get yours right. So we've seen many AI projects. I would like to believe that ours have been very successful, which I think they have, but we've also come into organizations where they started down the AI path and it didn't get them where they wanted to go. So I'm going to try and synthesize, what are the things that we've seen happen, and then, how can we help you do a better job of it. So thank you.